Hey, what's going on guys? RVZ Stealth here, and in today's video I have, in my opinion, the best top lane champions for Season 4 patch 4.16. Now, my list has not changed very much from the last patch that I did best top lane champions for. I think it was 4.14 I did the last tier list for top lane, and there's just a few changes, not too many major changes, but it was requested for me to do this video for 4.16, so here it is. First up, I have Irelia. So pros to Irelia are she has a gap closer, she has true damage on her W, which makes her cut through tanks pretty fast. She has sustain because her W gives health back. She's got a super long stun. If you can use your gap closer, which is your Q, to jump on the enemy AD carry or AP carry in a team fight and just stun them for it stuns for 2 seconds if they are higher health than you, then you can just melt them really quickly, so it's really strong if you can do that. And she scales really well into the late game because she can do a lot of damage while still being tanky at the same time. She's got really good Triforce synergy because with the Sheen, she can proc that a lot because of her ultimate and with her other abilities. And she also has insane sticking power with her Q and as well as her E. Cons to Irelia are ranged CC champions counter her like Ryze and Lulu, and she needs her items to be effective. And also one more that I didn't include in there was that her E, it only stuns if her opponent is higher health than you, so it's kind of bad in that aspect, but if they're higher health than you, then it just slows them, which is also not bad, but it would be nice if her E was a stun at all times. That would make her so much stronger. So next up, I have Lulu, and pros to Lulu are she is a really good lane bully. She counters a lot of melee champions, and she can just poke them down and zone them. She is ranged, which helps a lot, and she's got great utility with her ultimate, with her polymorph, with her Q. She has basically all of her abilities have some sort of utility in them. She's got really good CC. She is hard to dive, especially when she hits level 6, because she can just polymorph you, she can pop her ult, she can slow you, so she's really hard to dive. And she's pretty easy to play and counters a lot of melee champions, like I said. Cons to Lulu are she doesn't do a lot of damage. After the nerfs, her damage isn't the best, so you can't really rely on yourself to do all the damage on the team. And she is quite mana hungry early game. And she needs to have a tanky support and jungle, or at least one of those, because she usually doesn't build tank. And if you don't have a tanky jungle or a tanky support, then you're not going to do very well in team fights because Lulu isn't really tanky. So next up I have Ryze, and pros to Ryze are he's got really good poke with his Q. He can build tanky and still do a lot of damage because he scales with mana. His Rune Prism is really strong for denying enemy jungler ganks or for locking down a target in a team fight, and it's also guaranteed that you're going to hit it because all of his abilities are point and click. And he scales insanely well into the late game. He's super easy to play, as like I said, all of his abilities are point and click, and he has guaranteed damage, guaranteed a lot of damage because his abilities are really strong and on such a short cooldown. He's easy to farm with because his Q is on a short cooldown, and if he gets pushed under tower, then he can just use that to CS. He scales with mana, and he counters a lot of melee champions. For example, Irelia or Jax or Renekton, if they try to jump on him, he can just use his Rune Prism, back off, and then as they're walking away, just hit them with his Q and his E, and he'll basically win the trade every single time. He's got really good wave clear late game with his ultimate. It's only on a 30-second cooldown, so he can just spam that to clear waves. And he's a strong duelist late game because he's tanky, but he still does a lot of burst damage. Cons to Ryze are he does have low mobility, so you have to be careful about how far you're pushing up the lane and make sure you're warding because especially before level 6, he's quite vulnerable to ganks. and he does need his items. Once he's pretty weak early game, but once he starts stacking his tier and gets his rod stacked, then that's when he starts to do a lot of damage. So you got to make sure that you're playing safer and just make sure that you're CSing in the laning phase so that the enemy jungler doesn't come and gank you and just shut you down. And he is quite mana hungry early, so just be careful about spamming your Q too much. Next up, I have Nidalee, and pros to Nidalee she is a really good lane bully. Because she's AD now, she can just poke down her enemy with auto attacks and also get a couple spears in there. She snowballs really well, and she is a good split pusher because of her E. It gives an attack speed steroid, so she can use that to split push really well. She's got insane sustain because of her E, because it heals her. And she's got built-in vision in her W, so she can just put down her W, and if the enemy jungler walks over it, then she'll gain vision on them, so she doesn't really have to buy wards because of that. And she's super strong early game. She's got great mobility with her W in Cougar form, and then her passive. It makes her really strong for either catching up to opponents or just escaping from them. Constantly, she doesn't have any CC. Most of the top laners I have on my list have some sort of CC, but Nidalee does not, which means if she doesn't get ahead, then she's kind of useless because she does need her items. And she's a weaker team fighter as well. If you don't hit your spear to get your passive procced, then her team fight isn't the best because she won't be able to burst down a target. And she does get outscaled by champions like Jax she can't duel them late game because she doesn't do as much damage as they do. So my number one pick for patch 4.16 is Maokai, and pros to Maokai he's got a really strong laning phase. He is a good team fighter. His ultimate makes him a good team fighter because it gives him and his team 20% reduced damage if they're standing inside of it. So he's got really good sustain in lane as well with his passive. He is extremely tanky. He does surprisingly good amount of damage, even though he is really tanky. And it's really easy for you to lock down enemy high priority targets with his W because it's a point and click ability, and you can just use that to lock down your target really easily and just chain that with all your CC. He has good peel because of his W. If an enemy tries to jump on your AD carry or your high priority target, then he can just W to them, use his Q to knock them up, and your teammate will probably be able to get away. And he's really easy to play, easy to pick up on. Once you play a few games on Maokai, he's really simple. And I definitely recommend him if you're looking for a strong top laner who's quite easy to play. Cons to Maokai are ranged champions do counter him, like Lulu and Ryze, and they can poke him down early game and just zone him. He's pretty easy to gank, especially pre-6, because he does not have mobility, and he's also quite mana hungry early game, so just be careful that you're not spamming your E to poke a lot and just spamming your abilities, because he will run low on mana pretty quickly. But overall, Maokai is a super strong champion. He's a teamfight based champion, and you want to make sure that you're finding team fights because his ultimate is really strong for that, and he is, in my opinion, the best top laner for patch 4.16. So honorable mentions for this patch include Alistar, Gragas, and Jax. Alistar fell off of my list because the recent nerf that he cannot use his W and then auto attack to proc his Sheen right after that kind of hurt his trading in lane, and he's still a strong pick, but just not in my top 5. Gragas, a lot of people thought that after the nerfs to Gragas, he just became absolutely crap, but I still think Gragas is a strong pick for top lane. He's still a pretty good lane bully. He's got good poke, and he's with the percentage health damage that his W gives, he's really strong against tanky champions like Maokai, so I would recommend still playing Gragas. All of his CC is super strong for team fights, and he's still a strong pick in my opinion. And of course, Jax, he's still an honorable mention because if you get to late game Jax, then you're just going to be able to destroy the enemy team. You can literally, well, he's probably the best duelist late game, maybe other than Nasus, but Jax scales insanely well into the late game, and he's a really strong split pusher, so any of these champions I have on honorable mentions here are still very strong picks. So that is all for the video, guys. If you enjoyed, then be sure to like and subscribe for more League of Legends content, and if you're wondering why I didn't include a certain champion on my list, then be sure to ask me why in the comments below, and I will get back to you on that. And thanks for watching, guys. I will see you in my next video.